Have you ever had a cookie so good that you just couldn't stop at one? Well, let me introduce you to my lemon cookies with cranberry buttercream. These little beauties are bright, buttery, and perfectly balanced between sweet and tangy. Every time I make them, they disappear faster than I can plate them. For me, baking isn't just about making treats. It's about creating something special. Whether I need a pick-me-up, want to impress guests, or just crave a burst of citrusy sweetness, these cookies always deliver. And let's be honest, who can resist a soft lemon cookie topped with a swirl of pink frosting? So, let's get baking. Grab your apron, turn up your favorite playlist, and let's make something delicious together. First things first, I start by mixing up this incredible dough. In a medium bowl, I whisk together 1 3/4 cups all-purpose flour. This is the foundation of my cookies, providing just the right structure for a soft, tender bite. I add half a teaspoon of salt because a little bit of salt makes a huge difference, enhancing all the flavors and keeping the sweetness from overwhelming the cookie. Next, I stir in half a teaspoon baking powder to give the cookies just a bit of lift, so they stay light instead of dense. Then I add 1/2 teaspoon cream of tartar. This not only works as a leavening agent, but also gives a subtle tang that pairs beautifully with the lemon. Now, on to the wet ingredients. In a large mixing bowl, I whisk together half a cup melted and cooled unsalted butter. Butter is what gives these cookies their richness and that homemade goodness. I add 1 cup granulated sugar, which not only sweetens the cookies, but also helps create that perfect crumbly texture. Whisking everything together until smooth and glossy is key. I make sure the butter and sugar are fully incorporated before moving on. Next, I stir in half cup cream cheese, room temperature, and whisk until the mixture is light and creamy. The cream cheese adds extra softness and a slight tang that makes these cookies completely irresistible. I need to separate the egg yolk from the white. First, I carefully crack an egg into a small bowl, making sure not to break the yolk. Then, using a slotted spoon, I gently scoop up the yolk, allowing the egg white to drain through the slots. Once the yolk is fully separated, I transfer it to another bowl, ensuring a clean separation for my recipe. Now, I add 1 large egg yolk. Using just the yolk gives the cookies a rich texture without making them too cakey. For even more lemony goodness, I add 1/2 teaspoon lemon extract, optional. If you love a bold citrus punch, this is a must. Then I mix in 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, which adds warmth and depth, balancing out the bright citrus flavors. I always start with fresh, firm lemons. Before zesting, I give them a good wash and dry them. Since lemon juice can be rough on the skin, I like to wear disposable vinyl gloves while handling them. The acidity can leave my hands feeling dry or irritated, especially if I have any small cuts. For zest, I use a fine grater, microplane, or citrus zester. I like to zest directly over the large mixing bowl, so all those fragrant oils and zest go straight into the batter. I hold the lemon firmly and gently drag the grater across the surface, rotating as I go. The key is to only zest the outermost yellow layer, avoiding the bitter white pith underneath. once I have enough zest, it's time for the juice. I roll the lemons on the counter while pressing down with my palm. This helps break down the membranes inside, making them easier to juice. Then, I cut them in half and squeeze out half of the lemon juice instead of the full amount because I don't want the lemon flavor to be too overpowering in the cookies. The balance of flavors is key. Immediately, my kitchen fills with the bright, fresh scent of citrus. Such a satisfying moment. Finally, I gradually mix in the dry ingredients, stirring just until combined. I'm careful not to overmix. The key to light and tender cookies is stopping as soon as I no longer see streaks of flour. And just like that, my lemon cookie dough is ready to go. Achieving the perfect shape for Spritz cookies comes down to 3 key factors: dough consistency, proper technique, and room temperature. If the dough is too soft, the cookies may spread excessively and lose their shape. If it's too firm, pressing it through the cookie press can become a struggle. Room temperature plays a crucial role in shaping Spritz cookies. If the kitchen is too warm, the dough may soften too much, causing the cookies to lose their definition in the oven. On the other hand, if the environment is too cold, the dough can become too stiff, making it difficult to press. Keeping the kitchen temperature between 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 22 degrees Celsius, helps maintain the ideal consistency. Before I begin, I always check the temperature in my kitchen. Just a few degrees can make a noticeable difference in how the dough behaves. I start by lining a baking sheet with parchment paper to prevent sticking. Then, I fill my cookie press with the prepared dough, making sure it's packed in evenly to avoid air pockets. Before pressing the full batch, I test one cookie to assess the dough consistency. If the dough is too soft and sticks to the press instead of releasing cleanly, I place the loaded press in the fridge for 5 to 8 minutes to firm up the dough slightly. If the dough is too stiff and difficult to press out, I let it sit in a warmer spot for a few minutes to soften just enough for smooth pressing. Holding the press firmly against the cool, parchment-lined baking sheet, I press the handle evenly to release a well-shaped cookie. If the dough isn't sticking to the sheet, I leave about 1 inch between each cookie to allow for slight spreading while baking. Once all the cookies are piped, I chill the entire baking sheet for 15 minutes before baking. This extra step helps the cookies hold their intricate designs and prevents excessive spreading in the oven. A small tip: to ensure uniform cookies, I work in batches, pressing all the cookies onto the baking sheet before placing it in the oven. This prevents the dough from warming up too much in my hands, which could affect the consistency. If I notice inconsistencies in shape, I pause, chill the dough briefly, and then continue pressing. Shaping Spritz cookies takes a little practice, but once you get the feel for it, the process becomes smooth and enjoyable. With the right techniques and a little patience, you will have beautifully shaped bakery quality cookies every time. Once the Spritz cookies are shaped and chilled, it's time to bake them to golden perfection. I always start by preheating the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 degrees Celsius to ensure even baking and help the cookies hold their intricate designs. I place the baking sheet on the middle rack for even heat distribution. Since Spritz cookies are delicate and bake quickly, I keep a close eye on them. They typically need 10 to 12 minutes, depending on their size and thickness. I look for the edges to turn lightly golden, while ensuring they don't over-brown. Since ovens vary, I always check the cookies at the 9-minute mark and add an extra minute or two if needed. To prevent uneven baking, I bake one tray at a time, allowing each batch to bake evenly without temperature fluctuations. Before I can make the buttercream, I need to prepare the cranberry puree. I always prefer using fresh cranberries because they provide the best tartness and vibrant color. But if fresh cranberries aren't available, frozen ones work just as well. Just be sure to thaw and drain them first to prevent excess liquid from watering down the puree. I start by washing 1 cup of fresh cranberries and sorting through them, removing any that are soft or shriveled. Next, I add the cleaned cranberries to a small saucepan. Then I add 2 to 3 tablespoons of water to help the cranberries cook down smoothly. I pour in 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar to help balance the tartness. I cook everything over medium heat, stirring occasionally until the cranberries burst and soften. This usually takes about 5 minutes. Here's an important tip to keep in mind for this recipe. Baking Spritz cookies at high altitudes requires slight adjustments to maintain the right texture and prevent excessive spreading. At elevations above 3,500 feet, lower air pressure can cause cookies to spread more quickly and bake faster. To compensate, I reduce the sugar slightly and add 1 to 2 extra tablespoons of flour to help the dough hold its shape. I also decrease the baking powder or baking soda by about 1/8 teaspoon to prevent the cookies from puffing up too much. At lower altitudes, cookies may need a slightly longer baking time, so I adjust as necessary while keeping a close watch. Regardless of altitude, I test a small batch first to fine-tune both the dough and baking time for the best results. Once the cranberries are soft, I remove the pan from the heat and use an immersion blender to puree the mixture until smooth. If I'm using a regular immersion blender, I let the mixture cool slightly before blending to avoid splatters. Once blended, I pour the mixture through a fine mesh strainer over a large mixing bowl, pressing it through with a silicone spatula to remove any remaining chunks and ensure a smooth, silky texture. I let the puree cool completely before using it in the buttercream. This is crucial. If the puree is too warm, it can melt the butter, causing the buttercream to separate and become too soft to pipe properly. Here's something to consider while making this recipe. Once baked, I let the cookies rest on the baking sheet for 2 to 3 minutes before carefully transferring them to a wire rack to cool completely. This short resting time allows them to firm up slightly, reducing the risk of breakage when moved. Why is cooling on a wire rack important? Leaving cookies on the hot baking sheet after they come out of the oven can cause them to continue baking from residual heat, which may result in overbaked, dry, or too crisp cookies. A wire rack allows air to circulate around the cookies, cooling them evenly and preventing the bottoms from becoming soggy. This is especially important for light, buttery cookies like Spritz, which can become too soft if moisture is trapped beneath them. If cookies sit too long on the baking sheet, they may stick and become difficult to remove. Transferring them at just the right moment ensures they maintain their delicate texture, crisp edges, and perfect structure. Spritz cookies are best enjoyed fresh, but they can be stored in an airtight container for up to a week, keeping their crisp, buttery texture intact. With the right baking and cooling techniques, they'll always look and taste just as they should, light, delicate, and delicious. Now that my cranberry puree is ready, I can start on the buttercream. In a mixing bowl, I start by adding 1 cup, 2 sticks of unsalted butter, softened. I always make sure my butter is at room temperature, as it whips up much easier and creates a smoother buttercream. I beat the butter on high speed for 2 to 3 minutes until it becomes light and fluffy. This step is crucial because properly aerating the butter makes the buttercream silky and easy to pipe. Next, I add the cooled cranberry puree to the mixing bowl. I mix on low speed to gently combine it with the butter, ensuring a smooth blend without separation. I take my time here, scraping down the sides of the bowl to make sure the puree is evenly incorporated. Once the puree is fully mixed in, the buttercream turns a gorgeous pink, and I can already tell it's going to be amazing. I continue mixing until the color is uniform and the consistency is silky and fluffy, making sure There are no streaks of butter left. The moment the puree blends in, the buttercream transforms into the most gorgeous pink hue. It's always so satisfying to watch. The tart cranberry flavor balances the sweetness of the buttercream beautifully. Then I gradually add 5 cups of powdered sugar, 1 cup at a time, mixing on low speed after each addition. This helps prevent a powdered sugar cloud from covering my kitchen. Once all the sugar is added, I increase the speed to high and continue beating for another 5 to 8 minutes. This ensures a light and creamy buttercream with the perfect consistency. One thing I've learned from years of baking is that buttercream can be a little unpredictable. If your cranberry buttercream isn't coming together the way you want, don't worry. I've got some easy fixes to help you get it just right. The temperature of your kitchen plays a huge role in how your buttercream behaves. If your kitchen is too warm, the buttercream can turn too soft and runny. If it's too cold, the butter can stiffen, making the frosting difficult to mix and spread. The ideal room temperature for making buttercream is between 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 22 degrees Celsius. I always check my kitchen temperature before I start to avoid any unexpected texture issues. Sometimes, just adjusting the temperature of the room can make a big difference in how the buttercream turns out. If the buttercream feels too thick, I add 1 to 2 tablespoons of milk or heavy cream, 1 tablespoon at a time, mixing in between until I reach the perfect spreadable consistency. A little liquid goes a long way, so I take it slow to avoid making it too runny. If I accidentally add too much liquid, I'll pop the buttercream in the fridge for 10 minutes to firm it back up before re-whipping. If the buttercream is too thin, I sift in a 1/4 cup of powdered sugar at a time, mixing thoroughly after each addition until it thickens to the right consistency. Adding powdered sugar gradually prevents the frosting from becoming overly sweet, while still giving it enough structure for piping or spreading. Another trick I've learned is to let the buttercream sit for a few minutes before making adjustments. Sometimes the texture settles on its own, and all it needs is a quick mix to become perfectly smooth and fluffy again. If the buttercream becomes too soft because of a warm kitchen, I place it in the fridge for 10 to 15 minutes. Then re-whip it to restore its firmness without making it too stiff. If it's too firm from a cold kitchen, I let it sit at room temperature for 10 minutes before mixing it again to bring back that creamy texture. much, I sometimes fold in 6 to 8 finely diced fresh cranberries at the very end. This step is optional, but I love how the little cranberry bits add bursts of tartness and a subtle chewy texture. If I'm planning to use the buttercream for piping intricate decorations, I leave out the diced cranberries to ensure a smooth consistency. I start by slicing the cranberries in half to keep them from rolling around on the cutting board. This makes them much easier to control while dicing. Then, using a large kitchen knife, I carefully dice them into small pieces, ensuring even sizes so they mix well into the buttercream without creating large chunks. Once I have my diced cranberries ready, I add them to the buttercream. Using a silicone spatula, I gently fold them in, making sure they are evenly distributed without overmixing. This step keeps the buttercream light and fluffy while adding small bursts of tart cranberry flavor in every bite. The diced cranberries give a nice contrast in texture, making the buttercream even more special. Transferring buttercream into a piping bag can seem messy, but I'll show you how to do it effortlessly. I like to use large 21-inch piping bags because they hold more buttercream, reducing the need for frequent refills. If the bag is too long after filling, I simply trim the end with scissors for easier handling. Before transferring the buttercream, I first fit the piping bag with a metal piping tip. I prefer using a Wilton 32 tip, which creates beautiful ridged designs. Once the tip is in place, I fold the top edge of the piping bag over my hand or the rim of a tall glass. This creates an opening that makes filling much easier. Using a silicone spatula, I begin spooning the buttercream into the bag while holding it steady with my other hand. I do this slowly to avoid trapping air pockets, which can cause uneven piping. Once the bag is filled, I gently push the buttercream forward, removing any air bubbles before sealing the top. I twist the end of the bag tightly to keep the buttercream secure and use a piping bag tie to prevent any from squeezing out the top while decorating. Finally, if there's any extra length at the top of the bag that gets in the way, I trim it off with scissors to make handling even easier. And just like that, the buttercream is ready to be piped onto my delicious cookies. Now for the grand finale, assembling the Spritz cookies. This step is where everything comes together, transforming individual cookies into beautiful, delicious sandwich treats. I start by laying out half of the cookies upside down on a sheet of parchment paper. This makes it easier to work efficiently without missing any cookies and ensures a smooth, flat surface for the buttercream. Next, I take my piping bag filled with cranberry buttercream and carefully pipe a generous swirl onto each upside-down cookie. I like to start from the center and swirl outward, making sure to leave a small space around the edges so that the buttercream doesn't spill out when the cookies are pressed together. Then comes the fun part, making the sandwiches. I take the remaining cookies and gently place them on top of the buttercream covered ones, pressing lightly to form a perfect sandwich. I make sure not to press too hard. I want the buttercream to spread evenly without oozing out of the sides. If any buttercream does escape, I use a small offset spatula to smooth it out for a polished look. For an elegant finishing touch, I use a small sifter to dust the cookies with a delicate layer of powdered sugar. I gently tap the sifter, allowing the sugar to fall evenly over each cookie, creating a beautiful soft coating that enhances their appearance. This technique not only gives the cookies a classic bakery-style look, but also adds a touch of sweetness to every bite. The fine dusting highlights the details of any decorative shapes or patterns, making them look even more inviting and perfect for serving on special occasions. If I want to take them up a notch, I drizzle melted white chocolate over the tops in a zigzag pattern, letting it set for a few minutes before serving. The white chocolate pairs beautifully with the tangy cranberry buttercream and adds an extra layer of indulgence. And just like that, the Spritz cookie sandwiches are ready to be enjoyed. Whether I'm serving them at a gathering, gifting them to friends, or just sneaking one for myself with a cup of tea, these cookies always bring a little moment of joy. After one bite, my daughter exclaimed, "These taste like fancy macarons." She wasn't wrong. These cookies have that bakery-style charm while being incredibly easy to make at home. The contrast of the buttery lemon cookie with the tangy cranberry buttercream creates the perfect balance of flavors, making them a standout treat for any occasion. If you're thinking of gifting these, I've got you covered. There's something extra special about sharing homemade cookies with friends and family, and with the right packaging, they can look just as impressive as they taste. In my next video, I'll show you some creative and budget-friendly ways to package homemade cookies beautifully. Whether you want an elegant, polished, look for holiday gifts or a rustic, homemade feel for a cozy treat box, I have plenty of tips to make your cookies stand out. Plus, I'll share my go-to storage tips to keep your cookies fresh for as long as possible, and even show you how to prep them in advance for stress-free holiday baking. So, don't miss it. I'll see you there.